Imagine taking your generosity to the next level, impacting more lives and leaving a godly legacy for generations to come. Get ideas and strategies to do just that when you listen to these personal stories from high-level kingdom champions. The Kingdom Investor Podcast showcases business leaders who have moved from success to significance, sharing how they use worldly wealth for kingdom impact. Discover how they grew in generosity, impacted more lives, and built godly legacies. You'll find motivation, inspiration, and practical steps to grow as a kingdom investor.
Welcome to the Kingdom Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel White, and today I have with me my co-host, David Clinton. We're interviewing James Lenhoff. James, where are you coming from?
Cincinnati, Ohio, where it is gray and rainy right now.
All right. Well, James, can you give us just a little bit of a background about you, and then we'll pray and get started?
Yeah, background. I've been married for 21 years to my wife, Amy. We have 3 kids. Max is 16, Wes is 13, and Mia is 12. And I have been in the financial planning, wealth management business for 22 years and have walked a lot of life. We have about 1,500 families that we work for. And so I've seen life lived out at all these different stages and decisions that people make that lead to a lot of beauty and a lot of connection, and others that lead to a lot of pain. And I've discovered that my job is to protect people from the regret that compounds over time, not really so much making more money for them, but protecting them from the pain that they could experience. So it's a really amazing privilege to get to walk life with people and give them that kind of guidance.
All right. Yeah, that's good. Let me go ahead and pray, and then we'll jump right into the episode. God, I pray that you would help us to speak clearly about what you're calling us to say in this episode, that, Lord, our listeners would hear what you're telling them, and that you would be glorified above all else. We are here to glorify you, to live for you, and to invest in your kingdom. God, we want to use everything that we have, that you have given us, to advance your kingdom here and around the world, for your name to be lifted up and glorified. Lord, I pray for us to come up with ideas and hear ideas on how to do that and how to live for you better. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks.
So, James, can you give us a little bit of background about Wealth Quest and really kind of the genesis story behind that?
Sure. Yeah. So when I started my career, I started in 2000, right as the tech bubble was peaking. I got in the investment business. I graduated early from college and thought, man, I should get into the investment world because it's really hot. And man, God's sovereignty is all over that, because 6 months later, the tech bubble popped and nobody was hiring. So had I graduated on time, I would have been doing something totally different. So I started in that season of panic and chaos, and pretty quickly started to recognize that money is really emotional. It's actually not as mathematical as everybody thinks it is. It's relational. It's where all of our human brokenness kind of gets mixed up. And 5 years in, I started with my business partner, Wade Daniel. We launched Wealth Quest. And it was really out of this awareness that we've been solving the wrong problem, that the industry thinks that the problem to solve is a rate of return point. We don't actually have a whole lot of control over that. We're all buying the same stuff. It's pretty hard to hang your value proposition on something that is completely arbitrary. And so what we really need to be solving is the fact that people are overwhelmed. They're struggling with coordinating all these different moving parts. They got an accountant over here. They got an attorney over there. They got 5 different places where money's invested, and none of those people talk to each other. And so we said, that's actually the problem. Mm-hmm. And so we brought everybody together. So we do our clients' tax work, we do their estate design, we do all their financial planning, their investment management, all one team working together, figuring it out. And our tagline is, invest in your life, we'll do the rest, right? The idea is, so many people get so wrapped around these poles of investing that that's all they're thinking about, and they miss life as a result. And so we want to give them space to go do the things they said they wanted to do and get out of the weeds of all the minutia and the blocking and tackling. So we started in 2006 with about 100 clients and 67 million in assets we were managing, and 4 employees. And now we have about 40 employees. We have about 1,500 families that we serve, and we manage about 1.7 billion in assets. So it has been this crazy rocket ship ride that just Wade and I kind of hold it open-handedly and say, all right, God, I don't know what we're doing with this. This is all yours anyway. So tell us what you want us to do with it. And it's been a really fun experience.
They're most of your clientele in the Ohio area or across the country?
All over the place. Yeah, we have clients in about 46 states and a few countries, actually, expats that live internationally. We have our main office in Cincinnati. We also have an office in Chicago and one in Naples, Florida as well. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And is your fee-based, is that right?
Fee only. Yep. Fee only financial planning and investment management. So we're registered with the SEC and have the fiduciary role, which is really important in our world.
Awesome. Well, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what areas in your life you think you've found the most success and maybe how you got there. Success is born out of failures or regrets. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. I thank my dad on a regular basis that he instilled in me the willingness to try things. Failure has always been something that's actually a fun learning opportunity, not something I've ever been afraid of. And so I'll never forget, just as kind of an example of that, my dad, when I was little, was like, hey, let's go down the street. Our neighbor down there, their water heater went out. Let's go replace their water heater. And I was like, Dad, we're not plumbers. Like, we don't know how to do this. He's like, how hard could it be? Let's go try. Worst thing that happens is they call a plumber. Let's go. Let's see what we can do. And we did it. Probably took a lot longer than a plumber would have done it. But those kinds of attitudes of like, the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work, but let's try, has really set me up for just a lot of opportunity to try things and learn things. And so I think what I hope people would say is where I've been most successful is in being able to balance work and ministry and doing things that matter, because I've been able to say, hey, this doesn't define me. So I can go do men's pastor leadership of men. I heart cry for men understanding their emotion. I got certified as a life coach. I've gotten all these things that I've done that are really aimed at helping people do relationships better. And that's been a lot of fun to just say yes to things and try things where everyone probably thinks my success lies is in the business world.
Sure.
And I don't know if I can take credit for any of that. If my 21-year-old self, when I first graduated, if I told that kid, hey, here's what would happen. You're going to manage this thing. It's going to turn into this big firm. We're going to have all these clients that we're going to be leading. That kid would ask me how, and I would tell him, I have no idea. I can't draw you a map. I can't explain it to you. You can't take credit for any of this because I can't tell you how it happened. God just decided this is where it was going. And we just, held on. So
awesome.
It is, yeah.
What are the things you've learned along the way that maybe were unexpected?
I would say one of the biggest things that I learned is that what I call the lie of being irreplaceable, is vicious. So I talk about this in the book, this idea that we have this lie that we tell ourselves and that's told to us, you're the only person who can do this. You're the only one that can lead this team, manage this case, sell this deal, close this prospect, whatever, right? You're the only one. We need you. And I would turn to my spouse and my kids and say, hey, you don't understand. I got to go. I'm the only one. And they can't compete with that, right? They can't say, hey, Dad, you've done such a great job this quarter. We're going to give you a promotion. You're going to now vice president of fatherhood. Like, I'm just dad. And they can't give me a bonus. They can't do anything. There's no attaboys there. But I leave them and I go do this job that, quite frankly, thousands of people could do. And a lot of them could probably do it better than I can. But there's nobody that can be a father to my kids on this planet. And there's nobody who can be a husband to my wife other than me. I am irreplaceable there. And yet I go do these things where anybody could do this job. And the problem with that is I'm better at my job. I've trained for it. I know how to do it. I am in my wheelhouse. I've never raised a 16-year-old boy before.
Right.
I have no idea how to do this. Right. And so it's my comfort zone. And so we're drawn to it for so many reasons. And I'm constantly learning why I have to remind myself, this is the point. Anybody can do that work. And so I wish I learned that earlier than I did, but that's probably my biggest awareness lately.
Amazing. That's awesome. You referenced a book.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. I wrote a book called Living a Rich Life, and it is 22 years of doing this. I have walked life with people and just gleaned wisdom. I don't know a lot of 43-year-olds that know a lot of 80-something-year-olds. It is such a gift. I just sit at their feet and hear their stories and just soak in all their wisdom. And God weighed really heavy on me one day and said, hey, I didn't give you access to all this perspective for your own good. You got to share this with people. And so I wrote this book, and it's really a series of regrets that I've seen people have. They lose sight of the fact that the decisions that they're making can lead to beauty and relational connection, or can lead to pain. And I get to see both sides. And what I've tried to determine is that there are tools, there are frameworks to think about these decisions decisions, not rules. I hate rules. They don't apply. There's too many twisty, curvy parts of life. Rules are really hard. So it's more of a framework. So things like generosity. Generosity should always be a priority because I think it's kind of the whole reason we're here is to lift the burdens of others. And so I teach tools like the abundance fund. Every financial planner worth their weight of salt or worth their salt tells you that you should have an emergency fund, which is answering the question, what if things go poorly? But we need to have a better answer for the other question, which is what if things go well? Most of the time, the answer is, well, I'm just going to spend that money on myself. And I think we need to answer that question more as a steward rather than an owner of these resources. That steward would say, hey, I've already determined what I need. I don't need this. I'm going to set it aside. Things go well. I'm going to put it in this other checking account where it's ready. And if God says, hey, lift that burden, care for that family, make that cause, move that needle, whatever, we just obey immediately because the money's already there. We don't talk ourselves out of it. We don't tell ourselves, well, how are we going to afford it? We've already set it aside, waiting to just obey. And the beauty is you link arms with the king of the universe to do the work he's calling you to, and you say yes. And then you just get to experience the delight of it.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of things. It's like this, we don't need to complicate this.
Right.
But we need to recognize that these are emotional and spiritual issues. They're not math problems that we're solving.
Where can listeners find that book?
It's on Amazon. And they can also connect to me at our website is livingarichllife.com. I also have a podcast called the Rich Life Podcast where we talk about a lot of those ideas as well. So super fun.
So now we're looking into those as soon as we get off of here.
Well, thanks. That's great. Yeah.
So James, what was one of the catalysts to you really kind of shifting from success to significance and looking at, okay, what is really going to be important? And even having some of those conversations with the people that are further along than you and getting to really dive in and see what mattered most to them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And if there was a particular time or one that stands out to you?
Yeah, it was about 12 years ago. I was 10 years into the investment business and was convinced that my job was to help rich people get richer. That really the whole point was compounding more money. And I love compound interest. It's amazing, super powerful. It's my favorite thing. But I'm sitting across the table from an 80-year-old, 83-year-old client, and we were in some space where he just really opened up and started to tell me all the things he regretted, all the decisions in his life that at the time made all the financial sense in the world, and he hates them, and he wishes he'd have picked a different path. And then 10 minutes later, I had an appointment with a 30-year-old who was telling me all the things that they were about to do and why they make all the financial sense in the world, and it's obvious that this is the right answer. And I said, oh, I have you as an 83-year-old client. And that guy would tell you that everything you think makes sense is what he regrets every day.
Wow.
And it blew me up. And I realized the point here is I got to protect people from the regret that compounds worse than it compounds more quickly and more painfully than money ever does. And so we got to get out ahead of that and protect them from that. And so I realized in that moment that the conversations that we need to be having in this industry are very different than the ones we have been having. We got to stop talking about math. Math is easy. We complicate it because it serves us as an industry, right? It's really helpful when we tell everybody, oh, this is really hard to understand. You need me. Nah, the math isn't that hard. The hard part is the fact that money is emotional and relational. And we don't want to get into that because there's not a right answer like there is with math.
It's messy.
Yeah, it's very messy. That's right. That's right.
So after that moment, what really changed in your life and how did you kind of take action with that newfound understanding or perspective?
Yeah, I think what changed was the way that I thought about my work. I started to have conversations where I would ask a lot more questions. Most of my conversations before that were really me talking at people, giving them answers to all their questions. And I started to be much more intentional with my goal in each of my meetings now is to ask infinitely more questions than my clients do, which is super backwards.
Well, I would imagine people would like that more though.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, oh, I should have been doing this all along. Yeah, they want to talk about themselves and they want to talk about meaning and purpose and the relationships that they want to see healthy and grow. And that's the stuff that always has mattered, but it's never been the topic. Yeah. The topic has been asset allocation and, PE ratios and GDP and unemployment data and garbage that has never mattered to their life ever. Right. But that's what the industry has taught them. That's what we talk about when you come and talk to us. And so we're trying to change. My tagline in my podcast is that I'm on a mission to change the conversation about money because we've been having the wrong conversation for generations.
You find that people have more joy, more fulfillment when they look at their money from that angle differently?
Yes.
They've been taught?
Yes. They find that they can actually start to understand what they want. I'm convinced that the world of life coach and financial planner have to merge. Life coaching, and I am a certified life coach, and I can tell you a lot of it is really hokey, and I get it, right? I totally get it, and I agree. The life coach in the traditional hokey sense says, hey, follow your dreams, live your passions. I have no idea how to afford it. I don't even know how the math works, but it doesn't matter. Just do what you love. And the financial planner says, if you tell me what you want, I can map it to the penny. I can tell you exactly how to do it, but the client doesn't know what they want.
Right.
And so they come in and they say, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll retire at 65. Is that what everybody does? I don't know. There's no compelling vision for what they're trying to accomplish. And so we need to be able to pull that vision out of them and then marry it with the planning. And man, you're unlocking something that they want to run after. Like, I don't have to force anybody to save. If we can paint a big enough picture that they're super passionate about, I have to like force them to stop, right? Because they'll run through walls to get that thing if it's compelling.
Yeah.
But we don't have that conversation typically. We just say, oh yeah, the typical person needs to save this much and and it's all math.
Yeah.
And they don't fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Do you have mostly Christians in your practice?
Great question. We have a lot of Christians in our firm. We have a lot of Christians as clients. We do not hold that out as a requirement. And we as a firm are neutral in that space. It is a little bit of a challenge in that for me, my position always is someone should work with us because we're excellent at the work.
Right.
Now, we happen to be excellent at the work we do because we want to honor God with it, but we are always going to be excellent at the work we do. We also happen to be Christians, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people in this industry, unfortunately, that I think can get those backwards and say, you should work with me because I'm a Christian. I actually have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm a Christian. So you should trust me, right? And it's like, well, we need to be excellent first and foremost. So yes, we are owned and led by believers, but we have clients and employees all over the place.
Right.
So, yep.
I'm curious about how the conversation about stewardship versus ownership comes up with your clients. Yeah. And that's a very important thing to you, but how do we make it important to our clients?
Great question. One of the things that's been really fun for me is asking them to tell me their story in a way that acknowledges all the things they had no control over. Huh. It wakes them up to the fact that, oh yeah, this isn't mine, right? So I can tell my story of building WealthQuest, that I, put in the effort and I busted my butt and I did the work that no one else wanted to do. And I got my certifications and and all those are fine. Right. Mm-hmm. But then I went to Haiti for my first mission trip, not too long after the earthquake down there. And we're driving through Port-au-Prince and there's all kinds of potholes and mess in the infrastructure, which I'm sure is still a mess. Unfortunately, I've been going a couple times a year ever since. But when we go through this section, there's this pothole in the middle of the road that we drive around. It's full of water because it had rained. And there's a little boy in there and he's probably 7 and he's naked and he's bathing himself in this muddy, mucky rainwater in the bottom of this pothole. And God broke in that moment. And he said, James, that boy did nothing to deserve to be in that pothole. And you did nothing to accomplish what you think you accomplished.
Wow.
This isn't about you. It's about me. And I realized, so I started telling myself the story of, I could have been born in Haiti. I could have been born to a single mom in the depths of poverty. I could have been born to a situation that would have led to a totally different outcome. 99.9% of all the things that actually mattered and set my trajectory, I had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
So it is really selfish for me to lay claim to any of this and act like it's mine. And so when clients are telling me their story, they'll say things like, I did thus and such. And I was like, okay, so tell me about your folks. Did they pay for your college? And they're like, yeah. I came out with no school debt. Interesting. Okay. And then when you graduated, what was the timing? Was it the perfect time to enter into your industry? Oh gosh, it was amazing. I mean, if it was a year later, everything collapsed. Isn't that interesting? You just kind of start pulling out, those are the things that actually changed everything. And you had nothing to do with them. And it just breaks them open to the fact that maybe it's not theirs.
Yeah. That's great.
It's a fun conversation, particularly with people who aren't believers, right? To be able to be like, wonder why that happened.
Right.
Wonder where that came from.
Now, going with unbelievers, do you see it beginning to work in their minds, the wheels turning?
Well, truth is truth, right? And so one of the things that's really fun, a lot of times I kind of consider myself to be a little bit in for lack of a better term, spiritual espionage, right? Where it's I want to always share the truth and I want to always invite them in to a deeper knowledge of just how things really work, but I'm not going to bash them over the head with it. But one of the areas where I find that is most compelling is generosity.
Really?
Oh yeah. Everybody knows that this is why we're here, right? We all love the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, and everybody gets this, like, yeah, that's what it's supposed to be like, because we are hardwired to be generous.
Yeah.
And so when I start to wake up in them this idea of like, hey, wouldn't it be fun? And I always start from a place of the delight of it rather than the discipline of it. I think the church, unfortunately, has told everybody you have to do this way because this is what it says. Everyone should tithe. I'm totally fine with that. But what I try to wake up in them is, hey, what bothers you in the world? What really breaks your heart?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the things that break their heart are things that don't really bother me, but that's okay, right? They find this thing and I'm like, so what would it look like to actually change that? What are the organizations out there that are doing the work to make that problem go away? What would it look like to partner with them in that work?
Right.
Now we're and they're like, oh, I would love that. It's like, yeah, let's go do that. Right. This isn't hard, but you got to start from the place of joy. So beautiful instead of it's the discipline.
Right.
And then the discipline happens. Once you've tasted that beauty, you'll always do the discipline.
Right. You can't forget about it.
That's right. Yeah.
That's where my passion is. I want to, like you used the word awaken, awaken the joy of generosity in people. And so they see that this is, I don't know, it is more happy making, more blessed to give than receive. And it really is. So much joy comes out of it. And removing the barriers that people have, what's in the way of that joy? You feel scarce, like there's not enough, or don't know where to give. And so that's kind of my role in the body of Christ is how do I help people remove barriers and give more joyfully with the how and the mechanics of it and something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I found there's 3 what I call generosity circuit breakers. So we're hardwired to be, in this place of generosity and lifting the burdens of other humans. But something cuts that signal. And it's 3 stories. The first one is self-made versus fortunate, right? Mm-hmm. Which is I did it all by myself. Nobody helped me. So why should I help you? And that was Ebenezer Scrooge's breaker, right? Nobody helped me. And then the ghost of Christmas past says, that's not true. Everybody helped you. Everybody loved you. You were never alone in this. And he realizes how fortunate he was and it blows him open and he's throwing money at people, right? The other story is entitled versus gratitude, right? So this entitlement mindset says somewhere along the way, I got shortchanged. I deserve something and I can't give you anything until I get what's coming to me.
Yeah.
Where the gratitude mindset says, I can't believe what I have.
Right.
So if I can stay in that place where I don't deserve any of this, then I can give it. Right. And then the last one is what you alluded to, that scarcity versus abundance. The scarcity mindset is there's not enough to go around. We're all fighting over limited resources. We're all clawing at each other to protect ourselves. And I don't know if I have enough, so I can't give you any. Right. Where the abundance mindset says, man, there's plenty. The pie gets bigger. It always multiplies.
Yeah.
So I can give it aggressively. And the thing is, it doesn't take 3 of those. It only takes 1.
Yeah.
Whichever one it is, as soon as it cuts it, it's cut. Like there's, you can't recover it until you tell yourself a different story.
Right. That framework, it's so helpful. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been super helpful. And clients, when you're in there, you can have the conversation like, oh yeah, you got an entitlement thing. Yeah. We can talk about that. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is neat. Yeah. It makes me think a lot about generous giving. We have Todd Harper.
I love generous giving.
Coming up.
Oh, good. I love Todd. He's a great guy. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. David and I both do a lot with generous giving and have been to jogs, and I'm getting ready to host a jog. And I think David already has hosted several.
That's awesome.
Generosities.
They're great.
So James, looking at really your vision and even talking about your family vision, what can you share about that and how you're really investing your time, talents, and treasure in God's kingdom? And what does that look like on a practical level?
Yeah, that's a deep one. One of the things that we actually have a family vision course for our clients to go through.
Yeah.
Because one of the big mistakes we see families make is they don't have that central reference point for decision making. You end up making a decision based on how you're feeling in the moment or, what emotion you're trying to medicate, which is where most people make financial decisions. They want to feel more significant. They want to feel more important. And so they're spending money they don't have to buy that car that makes them feel better about that. That's why I've always said, these are never math problems. Nobody's ever outspending their resources because they can't do arithmetic, right? They're emotional issues. They're medicating themselves with these resources because it's less painful to acquire debt than it is to feel inadequate. Right. And so we always are medicating something. We got to understand what's going on there. But one of the big fixes for that is a central reference point, a family vision. We have ours hanging on our wall, and we have 4 values, 4 we will statements that surround that vision. And they are that we will be authentic and sincere. We will live in deep relationship. We will remain steadfast in Christ, and we will lift the burdens of others. Those are our 4 things. And so they're up on the wall, and they determine every decision. Every decision is then measured against, is this going to move us towards this or away from it? Is this going to make us more able to do these things, or is it going to take some of these away? And then that determines that it's easy. If you have that reference point, it's really easy to make a decision. And my kids come to me and they're like, hey, I think I want to do this thing. And I point at the wall and I'm like, does it fit? And they're like, yeah, I'm going to get to live in really deep relationship with these other friends of mine. I'm like, then the answer is yes. And if it's, well, I don't really know, it's like, yep. I don't even have to say no. Like, we're not doing it. It doesn't fit. Right. So it just gives all of us something that we're aiming at, and then everything else falls into place.
That's great. Is that available for people who aren't yet clients?
Yes, absolutely. It's out there on the web for free. If you just do a Google search for Wealth Quest Family Vision Course, Wealth Quest is one word, it'll take you right to it, and you can do it for free. And it's a series of family meetings. It's a really fun process. If you have kids that are already somewhat grown, it's really great to get them involved because they need to have a voice in this in order for it to be theirs. But we start with, like, what are we known for already? And then you move to, what do we want to be known for? And what are the things we are known for that we actually don't want to be known for anymore? Right. So you start to test that, like, somewhere in here, we're already doing some of this, and some of it we're actually already going against it. You can start to distill down those core issues. If we look at it from those 2 angles, stuff like that. And then you can start to say, okay, now what are we going to be about? What are those we will statements? And it frames up from there. It's really fun.
It's really cool.
Thanks.
It helps a lot with parenting too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the question that the kid always uses as its ultimate weapon is why, right? It's always why. And so if I can say, well, that's why, they're like, oh, okay. We don't have to have the argument. We've already decided this is what we're going to be. Yeah. It's crazy.
Perfect. When it comes to taking our generosity to the next level, do you have advice or guidance for people who are stuck at one of those 3 areas that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Well, I think the first piece of advice is figure out why you're stuck. Like, which of those stories has been your block? Right? Because that really then helps determine the work you need to do. Right. If it is a scarcity versus abundance issue, then the work you need to do is to determine what is enough. Like, get to a place where you find that there is security. Like, I do actually have enough. Prove that to yourself.
Right.
And then give the rest away. Right. Or if it's a self-made versus fortunate thing where nobody helped me, it's like, well, that is always not true. So tell yourself a story in a way that you realize how you were helped, and then that can sometimes be the compelling reason to go help somebody else in the same way. Right. So in my experience, circuit breaker conversation is everything, because it starts to unlock people, and then they want to go do likewise. Right. It's really easy when they get out of their own way.
It's joyful once they
so much fun. Yep.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we don't think that we have that much. And so we think that we can't really give anything. We don't have extra.
That's right.
Yeah. And so when you're like, well, to be honest, like, everybody's got something to give. It doesn't have to be substantial or what we would maybe think is a large sum, but even if you don't have money, you could give your time or your talents.
That's right. There's plenty to give. And the key is give something. My experience with this is that people tend to think that they'll give eventually. When they get to that, when I get there, wherever there is, when I get to that confidence that I have more than enough, then I'll give. And say, no, you won't. No, you won't. Because then you'll get to a place, I call this the floor and ceiling problem, right? When I get to where I have $2 million, then I'll feel secure and I'll give. Well, that's the ceiling, right? And then you get to 2 million and now it's your floor. Now you're standing on it. Now you have it. And now you can't go backwards because that's scary. The floor is sinking, right? So, well, now when I get to 3 million, then no, you won't. Like, you're going to have to build this out of some passion that will break through that theoretical then that's never going to happen, because the answer is now. Like, you should be giving now.
Right. Absolutely.
And they will give now. People will give now if they can connect to something that is pulling at their heart and can kind of compel them to take action beyond just the base discipline of it. There's $5 trillion of annual income that passes through the hands of Christian families in this country every year. If we were mediocre steward, the kingdom would, the Great Commission would be fulfilled, everything. Like, what the heck, man? $5 trillion. I thought we're going to be okay. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's amazing just, in my research on, okay, what is it going to take to finish the Great Commission funding wise? And, looking at the numbers and how efficient we've become with, utilizing indigenous missionaries and different mission organizations and things like that. It's so inexpensive to finish the Great Commission. And it's possible now to fund the Great Commission and really finish it within our generation.
For sure.
And, just changing our mindset and understanding that, hey, maybe if we invest in God's kingdom and finishing the Great Commission, instead of just, adding more to our own bank accounts and pursuing that, it's possible. So,
no, absolutely.
To mind questions about legacy, and I'm sure that comes up a lot with your clients.
For sure.
What look like these conversations, and you know what I mean? Building a legacy when your mindset is about stewardship versus hoarding and things like that.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting to me is that most of the time people think that their legacy is built by their estate plan. It's what they leave behind, right? I tell people all the time, I hate charitable giving in estate documents.
Mm-hmm.
It is just the worst. I'm totally fine with you doing it if that's the only way you want to dispose of your assets. That's fine. But what happens is people say, well, I won't give. And then when I know for sure I don't need it because I'm dead, then I'll give. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're missing it, man. Like, there's so much joy and delight available to you now. And so what I try to call people to is we try to highlight, what is it that you're actually trying to leave a thumbprint on? Like, how do you want the next generation to think about money? How do you want them to experience God's resources? And then how do you do that by actually interacting with them on that topic today? So a great example was a client that was really concerned about her grandchildren having kind of a materialistic mindset. It's hard if you're growing up in a wealthy family to not just get used to comfort and wealth. It just kind of comes with the territory. And so she's like, I just don't want them to be selfish and miss this. And I said, well, then get them involved in it now. They're 10 or whatever. They're in a place where I said, all right, well, let's get a donor advised fund opened up where you can make a big gift and then tell your grandkids, you each have $50,000 that you need to give away this year. And then have the conversation with them. What problem breaks your heart? What are the organizations that are moving in that space? And how do we partner together now to make that change rather than just hoping at some point they're going to catch the generosity bug? You're going to have to give them experience now. And so it was such a cool thing for her to have those interactions with her grandkids and pull them into this different story that's bigger than themselves. And I'd love to say this story ends with them being missionaries and they're totally selfless, and it's not. But, at least we move the needle a little bit.
Right. That's awesome. That's a real legacy right there.
That's right.
Passing along your values and teaching the grandkids what's important.
Yeah. It's not about just leaving them a check.
James, you started out talking about how many clients you've served and how getting to see them in their lives and, the 83-year-old and the, 30-year-old and all of that gives you so much perspective. Can you talk about one key thing that you've seen that has really changed the trajectory of some of these people?
Well, I would say one of the biggest things is helping them to recognize that experiences will always be worth more than things. I am all for people spending the money they saved. I love it. I think it's great. I don't want them to spend it on stuff. And one of the things that's really interesting is behavioral finance studies have shown us why it's true. We know intuitively that experiences are worth more, but it's really hard to convince ourselves because this thing is tangible. Like my phone, when I first got this phone, I could turn myself into a unicorn, and text my kids. It was super fun for a week. And now it's just my phone. I don't even care about it, right? Because the thing gets more familiar over time. We get used to it. It's called hedonic adaptation. It's a really fascinating process where we're like, yeah, the newness and the new car smell and whatever, it all wears off and the thing is familiar. And now we need a new thing. Right? What we experience with shared experiences is the opposite. The trip to Disney, which costs more than the car in my driveway, right? It's like, how is that worth more than the car? The car is tangible. I can sell it. But the reason is because it gets more distant. It actually gets less familiar over time. We cherish it. We tell stories about it. We bring it back into today to bring it back to familiar because it's so deeply valuable. And so the fact that experiences are vapor and they disappear is why we actually need to do more of them. It's so counterintuitive, but it's so true, right? And no one on their deathbed, which I've had lots of clients on their deathbed, unfortunately, no one on their deathbed is like, man, I really wish I'd have bought that iPhone 5 when it first came out. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. But they all, man, I could have spent more time doing the things, going the places. And so when I'm working with a client and they're saying things like, hey, one of our dreams is that we take our kids on a trip to this whatever crazy place. I'm like, book the tickets. Do it now.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Like we're not, and I need to tell you that if we get a couple of years down the road and you still haven't booked those tickets, I'm quitting as your advisor. Like I'm not going to keep working with you.
Yeah.
If you're not doing the things you said you want to do, which is so they're like, whoa, you mean you don't want me to just keep accumulating more and you just keep billing me more? And I'm like, no, I want to take pay cuts, man. I want you to spend this friggin' money. That's why you see today. So
that's great.
But experiences are always worth more than things. That's a really important piece for people to get.
Yeah, that's really good. So this has been a great episode, and I just wanted to give you one chance to share anything that you think is really important for our listeners to hear before we go into the lightning round.
Oh, there's a lightning round.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right. I'm scared already. So let's see. I would say, my biggest thing is that if people can transition from an ownership mindset to a stewardship mindset and have a shared vision for why they exist as a couple, as a family, it will change everything. There's something about the parable of the talents that I always come back to. One is the master expected multiplication. And we tend to think that we should bury it, we should hide it, we should stay safe. We should not be playing small ball.
Right.
We should be going after it, taking risks, being entrepreneurial, being the best at everything we do for his kingdom and for his glory, and then just going after it. We should not be shrinking back. At the same time, when it does double, right? When the master came back and the steward said, here's, I took your 5, I made it 10, it was still all his.
Right.
There was no scenario where they're like, here's your 10%, I'll take mine, or here, we'll split it 50-50. That feels fair. It was all his, always. Even after it did multiply. And so, that really is what should break people open into generosity, into investing in relationships and experiences. It's all his anyway, right? Like do the things he's calling you to do and do it with fearlessness.
One of the things that I think about, because you're exactly right, but we think that that's like we're giving up something. And really, God's already adopted us into his family. His kingdom is our kingdom.
Well done, good and faithful servant. Yeah. Enter into your master's joy, right? Yeah. Like we all get to do this together and it's beautiful. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
All right. What book are you reading right now, James?
Oof. All right. Lightning round. Okay. So book I'm reading right now, we are doing a book study at our office on atomic habits.
Cool.
It's excellent. James Clear, highly recommend it. It's a really good book.
What's the most unique place you've ever visited?
Haiti, for sure, is a very unique place. Vacation-wise, one of my favorite places on the planet is Glacier National Park.
Oh, yeah.
God's glory is on display in every inch of that place. It's just phenomenal. So,
what's one goal or skill that you're currently working on?
My kids all play music, and I am trying to get back into playing the guitar, and it takes a lot of discipline. I used to be a lot better at it, and so I have a hard time when I pick it up. I'm like, I used to be able to play this, and I stink. I got to act like a newbie again. So that's hard, but that's something I want to get better at.
Is there anything that we can either be praying for you or help you accomplish in your life?
Oh, man, I think the biggest thing is if I can get to a place where the conversation shifts in our industry, anything that you guys can be doing to help with that, anything that you can be praying for to just break this thing open and have us be engaged in the harder conversation, the more valuable conversation.
Right.
Man, if I can leave a thumbprint there, that feels like a job well done. So,
can you expound on that just a little bit more? What does changing the conversation about money mean?
I think it means engaging with people in the emotion that they're having around money and helping them understand what they're medicating with their money decisions, and that there's way more effective ways to feel what they want to feel. Addictions are ultimately medications of negative emotions, right? And those become these obvious, ugly things that people, shun and shame for. Being addicted to money is very similar, but it's something that people are proud of. And I'd like to change that and say, hey, it's the same thing. What are you medicating right now? Like, I'd love to get into those weeds and help them discover that there's so much more they could be doing. So
excellent. Last question. What's one thing God is teaching you this week?
Oh, man. He is teaching me to slow down and to be patient with those who are in need. I actually just had a conversation with a coworker. That's why I was a little late jumping on the call with you guys this morning. And it was just such a beautiful space to help her understand what's really going on in her heart. And man, like, I could have just run right past that. I needed to get on this, right? And I sat with her and we talked about it for, a few extra minutes longer than I had. And I think God's like, yep, that right there. Do that all the time.
Yeah. Really good.
That's great. You to be late for anything.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. I'm just going to keep being late. That's the goal. Yeah.
James, do you mind praying for our listeners before we close out?
Absolutely. I would love that.
Thanks.
So, Father, I am so grateful for this community that you are raising up that is changing the conversation about money. Thank you for the work that you are doing in the hearts of all of us. I pray for those listening, Lord, would you break us open from any scarcity, any fear, any sense that this stuff is ours? And would you remind us that you own it all? You gave it to us for a reason, and then invite us into the joy and the delight of honoring you with your resources. Just getting to play in that sandbox. You are doing amazing work, and we get to just be a part of it and link arms with each other and with you. And that's why we're here. And so I just pray that you would call us some more, break off the things that are blocking us from that more, and continue to build this community that is ultimately bringing your kingdom to earth. We're so grateful for that. So bless these resources. They're yours anyway. Use them as you wish. Have your way. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
And thank you, James. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Glad. Hey, thanks for having me. I always love having these conversations. So appreciate the work you guys are doing.
All right. God bless you.
You too.